In this lab, we're going to be learning how to perform and interpret the YMCA bench press. We want to understand what the YMCA bench press is, why we want to use it, and we want to be able to demonstrate so that you can learn the proper techniques and procedures for conducting the YMCA bench press, and then obviously how to interpret the results for your clients and students and so forth. If you look up the term strength, you may find several definitions, such as the quality or state of being physically strong, or the ability of an object or substance to withstand force or pressure. In the kinesiology realm, this can be quite vague because we often think of strength in terms of fitness or performance. When you hear the word strength, the first thing that probably comes to mind as a kinesiology major is the 1 repetition max, the 1 RM. And the first exercise you probably think of when you hear the 1 RM is the bench press. The 1 RM is the maximum weight we can lift in a single repetition and is probably the most widely used test for strength. Just remember, though, the bench press is not a measure of overall body strength. And since we can apply a 1 RM to just about any muscle group across a joint, we would have to assess more than just the bench press. As long as you have a standardized procedure to follow and some norms or criteria with which to compare, they can be useful in an exercise prescription. On the other hand, the 1 RM is not the only assessment of strength. There are protocols for multiple RMs, such as the 10 repetition max, which can be used to predict the 1 RM. And there are also muscle endurance protocols, such as the ones we're learning in this lab. Muscular endurance can be defined as a muscle's ability to repeatedly contract against a force for a period of time. And in the case of the YMCA bench press, we have some published norms by which to compare our clients' results, and we can also use an equation to predict 1 RM from it. In this lab, we're going to learn the YMCA bench press, which is an assessment using absolute strength. This means no matter how much you weigh, the weight used in the test is the same for everyone. So it's the same for males who lift 80 pounds, no matter how big you are. And it's the same for females, they lift 35 pounds, no matter how big or small you are. In short, it just uses a lighter weight that is to be lifted to the beat of a cadence to fatigue. So more on that in a bit. So why administer the YMCA bench press test? One, if you're concerned about your client's ability to lift heavy weight as required in a 1 rep max, the YMCA is a nice option for novice, elderly, those with orthopedic issues, and so on. It's also easy to administer, and it doesn't take a lot of time to do it. The information in this lab comes from Peter Inouye, who nicely summed up the usefulness of the YMCA bench press back in 2020. The standard equipment to be used for the YMCA bench press is a free weight using bench. Whenever possible, this should be used, since this is how the norms were developed. I've seen some use chest press machines, but I would highly caution against that if making normative comparisons for your client. Again, norms were not developed using these things, and since most of the machines use cables with elliptical pulleys, the number of repetitions could be different for the amount lifted. To conduct the YMCA bench press test, you also need a metronome. These can be inexpensive digital metronomes. You can download free apps to your phone, or you can just Google metronome and one will be available. Prior to the test, it's best to provide a warm-up, a general warm-up, then some stretching of the targeted muscles. Clients can simply walk on a treadmill at a self-selected pace for 5 minutes, and after which they should perform stretches for the shoulder, chest, and triceps. The goal of this test is to perform as many repetitions as possible while staying on cadence. Again, males are going to use 80 pounds and females will use 35 pounds. Everyone at a cadence of 30 repetitions per minute. Once you have the metronome, just be sure to set it at 60 beats per minute so that the bar is lifted on one beat, then return to the starting position on the next beat. Have your clients lie supine on a bench with head, shoulders, and hips supported firmly on the bench, feet resting at shoulder width on the floor. Be sure to let them know they should not arch their back, lift their head off the bench, or bounce the bar off their chest. Shouldn't do that. Before beginning the test, you can have your client position on the bench, turn on the metronome, and move their arms up and down in sync with the beat to mimic the test. When they understand the cadence, have them grip the bar so that their hands are slightly wider than the shoulder width grips, and let them know the importance of having a spotter for safety reasons. We certainly want to do that. When administering the YMCA, the spotter should help the client lift the bar and position it so that it's at the client's eyebrow level. The spotter will then release the bar, at which point the client lowers it to the beat of the metronome until it touches the chest, then raises it on the next beat through the full range of motion. In other words, arms are extended to the end position. So the repetitions are counted when the bar is pushed up. The test is finished when the client cannot maintain proper lifting technique, cannot extend to the full range of motion, if cadence cannot be maintained, or if the client requests to stop. And the number of successful repetitions, that's the score. After recording the values, the most common practice is to compare them with a normative set of data. Remember that when you're doing this, to be sure the normative data is appropriate to age, sex, and ethnicity. If you are a middle-aged adult, it is not wise to compare your values with an elderly person. What you see here, these are normative data of 100 males and 100 females between the ages of 18 and 29. I've got that reference right there for you. Now, these norms from YMCA of the USA back in 2020. Here you can see instead of percentiles, you have descriptors of performance against peers, not just by sex, but by age. So if you're a 22-year-old male and you were able to complete 31 reps, you'd be classified as above average. And these are the same norms from the previous slide, but instead of descriptors, you now see the percentiles. So if you're that same 22-year-old male and you were able to complete 31 reps, we saw in the previous slide, you'd fall about the 75th percentile, meaning you're above average for your sex and age, and about 25% of your peers perform better than you, and you perform better than about 75% of your peers. What we have here, these are prediction equations to estimate what your 1RM would be. For example, if my 22-year-old client from the previous slide did 31 reps, I'd want to multiply that by 1.34, then add 40.8. That would give me 82.34 kgs, and if I want to convert that to pounds, just multiply by 2.2, since we know they're about 2.2 pounds in every kilogram. That gives me 181 pounds. Now that you've completed your YMCA bench press for your client, and you've interpreted his results, you can move forward with an exercise prescription. So let's check out a demonstration. You first want to have your client do a general warm-up. This could be on an elliptical stationary bike, most often on a treadmill, at least 2.5 miles per hour. After the general warm-up, then have them do some targeted specific stretches for the chest and the triceps. When you fit your client to the bench, just make sure her feet are flat on the ground. The grip should be just wide of shoulder width, and the back and head should be flat on the bench. We should also allow our client the opportunity to practice the cadence so she knows how to stay with the beat. Once the client is ready, the spotter will position the bar to the up position, at which time the client will lower the bar to her chest on the beat, and then extend her arms to the up position on the next beat. Holding proper form, this will continue until the client can no longer maintain cadence, loses form, or requests to stop. And just to quickly recap, your client should not go too fast, should not go too slow. Your client should bring the bar all the way down to the chest. As well as extend all the way up. Araceli is 21 years old, and she was able to do 30 repetitions. For a female, that places her in the 75th percentile. We can also use a prediction equation where we enter the number of repetitions correctly performed. In this case, where we multiply that by 0.30 and then add 22.3. That gives us an estimated 1 repetition max of 31.3 kilograms. And when we multiply that by 2.2, we get an estimated 68-pound repetition max. We can then use this information to establish a baseline for an exercise prescription and/or monitor gains during an exercise program. And now you know what the YMCA bench press is. You know why it can be important to conduct this test, and you understand the proper techniques, the proper procedures for conducting this test, and how to interpret and evaluate the results.